The story that has never been successfully refuted, even though it's now a 5-year-old story, that's clearly a deportable offense. Is there an investigation into that?
You know, I just got advised by a fraud investigator the other day on that. I asked the question, who reviewed the file, and says that, there was immigration fraud involved. The statute of limitation became an issue in the last 4 years when this was first brought up.
Knowing all of that, here's Ilhan Omar on our immigration system under this president and the job that you're doing.
This is certainly not what the founding fathers of the American dream were thinking about when they said, that when they set out to write the Constitution.
Ever notice how a single instant on live TV can ignite a political inferno nationwide? That's precisely what unfolded when Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar confronted former ICE Director Tom Homan, and the aftermath has everyone buzzing today. We're dissecting the clash, the immigration enforcement showdown behind it, and why the chant "We are sending her back" erupted across headlines. Kate, welcome to Capitol Pulse. If you champion straight facts without spin, hit like, subscribe, and share, because the dialogue Washington refuses to hold is exactly the one we're leading right now. Let's dive in.
Unlike the Biden administration, we're following the Constitution. We're enforcing the law. We're not ignoring the law. And you're right. The proper, assimilation is important, and it's going to be required. Not only that, when they come here under legal program, they're required to be self-sufficient. They have to prove they're self-sufficient. So a lot of them, first thing they're doing to get here is get on the public dole. President Trump put his foot down, and like I said earlier, we're doing a deep dive on thousands and thousands of files, and we'll hold people accountable. And I'm so tired of them pulling the race card all the time,
right.
Because we're doing this racist. ICE has arrested people from 180 different...
Trump mentioning the Daily Mail reporting from 2020 that Ilhan Omar married her brother to get into the country. This was last week. Take a listen.
Look at their nation. Look how bad their nation is. It's not even a nation. It's just people walking around killing each other. They've taken billions and billions of dollars. They have a representative, Ilhan Omar, who they say married her brother. It's a fraud.
Calls that a fraud. It's a story that has never been successfully refuted, even though it's now a 5-year-old story. That's clearly a deportable offense. Is there an investigation into that?
I just got advised by a fraud investigator the other day on that. I asked the question, who reviewed the file, and says that, there was immigration fraud involved. The statute of limitation became an issue in the last 4 years when this was first brought up. Who was president? Who ran DOJ? So pulling the records now, pulling the files, and we're looking at it. But this fraud investigator, who I know personally, one of the best fraud investigators in HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, said there's no doubt he reviewed the file. So I'm running that down this week, matter of fact, and we'll see.
It's tremendous that, and according to the Secretary, Kristi Noem of DHS, she said nearly 50% of the visas are fraudulent in this community. That would mean that half the Somali refugees are here in some way illegally. What's going to happen? Is something's actually going to happen? Are there going to be people stripped of their visas, deported? Are we going to see that?
Absolutely. Those days are over. Thank God President Trump's in the White House. We're going to look at all of them. We're going to look at those here illegally. Of course, we're going to look at those here under a visa or some sort of, immigration process that are criminals. We're going to look at the national security threats. But those who came through a process that weren't properly vetted, who didn't provide documentation, who slipped through the Biden's weak processes on, giving visas and temporary, whether student visas or visitors visas or whatever. We're going the whole gamut. President Trump has instructed us go down, and we're going to deep dive all of this. And we're going to hold people accountable. So yes, there are going to be multiple deportations coming. Absolutely.
There's so many claims of a racist element to this story, and when we're talking about a certain subsection of refugees into this country. But it bears reminding the people that it wasn't very long ago at all that Americans expected that people that came to our country would contribute to the cause, would assimilate to our culture and to who we are. And we're just not seeing that at all in this community. We're seeing a community that's largely hostile to our culture, wants to bring in an Islamic culture into our nation, while doing so and staying vastly on the dole, on some kind of assistance, taking more than they can.
The tension erupted when Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar challenged current immigration enforcement policies, claiming they deviate from the founder's vision. She framed the crackdown on visa fraud and refugee vetting as extreme and politically charged, but former ICE Director Homan stood firm. He fired back, saying enforcement is not political, it is constitutional. Immigration law is not optional. Congress writes it, the executive branch enforces it, period. Then the deeper matter arose. Investigators reportedly began reviewing old immigration files linked to past allegations regarding Omar's previous marriage, claims she has denied, and no charges exist yet. Homan explained fraud investigators were revisiting records to determine whether statutes were properly applied and whether limitations periods matter. That triggered a viral response. Online supporters of stricter enforcement began repeating the phrase, "We are sending her back," not as a legal command, not as a court ruling, but as a rallying cry signaling a wider crackdown on immigration fraud regardless of position. Homan underscored three principles. First, enforcement is impartial. ICE detains individuals from more than 180 countries annually. Race, religion, or nationality do not determine outcomes. Second, legal compliance and self-sufficiency are vital. Visa applicants must prove they will not become a public charge, and misrepresentation can spark removal under federal law. And third, every case receives due process. Allegations are not convictions, reviews are not deportation orders, investigations are not vendettas. Meanwhile, Omar and allies argue the rhetoric itself is perilous. Phrases like "send her back" echo historical attacks on immigrants and minorities in office. This clash represents two stark visions of America's immigration system. One side views strict enforcement as fairness, security, and rule of law. The other sees aggressive rhetoric and expansive probes as threats to communities and democracy. What made it explosive was symbolism. A sitting lawmaker, a former federal chief, allegations revisited, cameras rolling, and a nation already divided over borders, sovereignty, and assimilation. The constitutional truth is removal can occur only under specific grounds defined in the Immigration and Nationality Act, requiring procedural safeguards, evidence, and court review. Even proven fraud cases follow legal channels, not emotion. Despite viral headlines, no official deportation order exists against Ilhan Omar. Only renewed political friction and national debate about enforcement priorities. That debate continues as border funding advances, vetting intensifies, fraud investigations accelerate, and politicians frame the fight as existential. The question remains, is strict enforcement restoring law and order, or is the rhetoric crossing a dangerous line? One certainty is when lawmakers and federal enforcement collide, the ripple effect shape national policy for years. I'm Kate, and this is Capital Pulse. Drop your thoughts in comments, like, subscribe, share so your voice joins the conversation, because in today's America the loudest narrative dominates and the truth demands a microphone.